How can the Republican Party win? Ladies and gentlemen, Governor Mike Huckabee.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Great audience here in the studio. And welcome to Huckabee from the Fox News studios in New York City. Tonight, we're going to focus on answering the question, how can the Republicans win? Now, in case that sounds like a very partisan approach, then let me be upfront and honest. It is. Look, I never pretend I'm objective or unbiased. My show welcomes views that aren't mine, but I hardly hide my own political leanings. I clearly believe that America would be better off if Republicans took control of the Senate this year, added to their numbers in the House, and took the White House in 2016. Now, that's not just to change the labels, but that's to change the direction of this great but struggling republic. We're suffering under an inexperienced executive leader who's proving that a background in being a community organizer helps him do what community organizers do: agitate, disrupt, and wreak havoc in the social and political order of society. But it's not the same as governing. His power grabs in health care, energy, foreign policy, taxes, immigration, and even determining which public monuments to close are mind-numbing. But while he treats the country as his personal kingdom over which he has authoritarian control, he takes no responsibility whatsoever for the disastrous failures of his priorities or his failed policies. None. It's always someone else's fault. George W. Bush's fault, the House Republicans, the Tea Party, always somebody else. Well, Republicans must unite and present a strong and unified effort to stand for personal freedom and responsibility, good jobs, less big government and more local and limited government, lower taxes, and a country where mothers and fathers raise their kids instead of letting the government do it. Because if we don't, we could see Speaker Pelosi take the podium and more years of Harry the Contrary Reid. The Democrats have learned how to keep their disagreements behind closed doors. Our folks on the Republican side spend more time and money fighting within the family than taking on the liberals. There are real issues, and some aren't easily agreed on, even among conservatives. But are differences among conservatives as big as differences that we have with the far-left loons who are in control of our government right now? Well, some of the topics that we're going to cover are Obamacare, out-of-control spending, diversity in the Republican Party, immigration reform, and social issues. I'm going to be joined by a panel of Republicans throughout the hour, and we're going to take a real good look at some of the Facebook and Twitter questions and the comments that we ask you to send us along with your concerns. Later in the hour, we're going to be joined by RNC Chairman Reince Priebus and get his input on how Republicans can win. Right now, let me introduce our panel. Joining us are Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee, Reverend Sammy Rodriguez, President of the National Hispanic Christian Leadership Conference, and one of America's most influential Latino and evangelical leaders. Crystal Wright is with us, editor of ConservativeBlackChick.com. And David Webb, host of Sirius XM Patriot Radio, founder of Tea Party 365, and a Fox News contributor. Great to have all of you guys here. It's going to be kind of fun. I want to start off with immigration. So, Sammy, I'll turn to you on this one. House Republicans have decided they're not going to take this issue up this year. I think a lot of people felt a little bit of a relief that it wasn't going to be this contentious battle. What do Republicans need to put on the table in the way of immigration reform that is not only effective to deal with the issue, because that's really the first reason, but then how to deal with it in a way that will be politically effective and not to do political suicide?
Right. Well, Governor, first, today's complacency is tomorrow's captivity. The Republican Party must cross the Jordan of immigration reform. I'm a preacher now, so sorry.
Preach on, brother. We'll pass the plate, but I get the money. Okay.
Hallelujah. The Republican Party must cross the Jordan of immigration reform if it's ever to step into the promised land of the Hispanic American electorate. And by not addressing immigration reform this year, it further alienates not only the Hispanic electorate, but the majority of people, according to a Fox News poll, the majority of people that carry Bibles, that wear badges, and run businesses. And what we need is not amnesty. amnesty is not an option.
So that's not something that the Hispanic community is clamoring for, because that's the perception, is that, well, you got to have amnesty or you're going to make them mad.
No, why should we grant amnesty to people that stepped into this nation illegally? Amnesty is not an option. What we're looking for is an immigration reform system that secures the borders, and we have technology to secure the borders, by the way. If we can read the license plate thousands of miles away in the back hills of Afghanistan, we can detect who's crossing the Rio Grande, you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we have the technology, the wherewithal. It's a matter of securing the border, stopping all illegal immigration, but providing a pathway for integration for those that are currently here. Those that are not depending on government entitlements, those that are self-sustaining, that resonate with our value system. These individuals, the majority of immigrants, really are in this nation to bless this nation, not to curse it. But not addressing immigration reform is going to further alienate an electorate and a demographic that resonates with conservative values on different levels.
How would it look, though, to have a way to deal with the 11 million or whatever the number is? Because I don't know that any of us really know.
Right.
What do we do with those folks who are already here?
Integration. There has to be a pathway for integration. First thing you do is you do not give them an expedited pathway to citizenship. Absolutely not. It's not fair for those that are coming into this nation legally, for those that have been here illegally, to go to the front of the line. Absolutely not. Matter of fact, that's morally reprehensible. They should go to the back of the line, get a guest worker visa, and the idea that 11 million people want to become U.S. citizens, that's a misnomer. Many of them just want to work here, go back to Mexico or El Salvador or their country of origin, come back and seasonally work here according to the needs of the various sectors of our economy. So let's provide a guest worker visa that may lead to permanent residency, and down the road, if they want to apply for citizenship, let them go to the back of the line, demonstrate proficiency in the English vernacular, pay fines, admit they came here illegally, and enjoy a caramel macchiato from somewhere.
Congresswoman, that proposal that Sammy has just talked about, the House has decided they're not even going to touch it this year, at least so far. Is what he's talking about realistic? Is that doable within the House as we know it today?
Governor, you know what? Some of the conservatives in the House have had an incremental process offered since 2003, securing the borders first, dealing with those that are the criminal illegal entrants, having ICE clean up the entrance and exit program so that we know who is here. When they have a visa, they leave when that visa expires. And then finding some components where you're dealing with legalization, not amnesty, not citizenship, but dealing with legalization. And doing that in an orderly process is what the American people want to see.
Do you think it'll happen more likely by pieces rather than an overall comprehensive?
Yes.
And yes. I guess I'm curious, is comprehensive necessary? Is that the ideal? Because I think a lot of us just don't trust the process of Congress as long as the Democrats are in charge of the Senate, that they're going to butcher it up some way, and even if it got there.
Well, and I think what the Congresswoman has said really makes the most sense. Americans want enforcement, and I have a problem with us calling it immigration reform because it's really about enforcement. We have immigration laws on our books, but we have a president who has instructed his Justice Department to ignore those laws. So what he said is, if somebody catches an illegal immigrant here and they don't have a criminal record, they're supposed to be allowed to continue to stay and work in the country. So I think for Republicans, I like the approach the House wants to take, as the Congresswoman said, incremental, focusing on enforcement. But I really don't see us passing any kind of big sweeping bill coming out of the House. I mean, we already know what happened in the Senate, but more importantly, the way Republicans can win the Hispanic vote and the black vote and everybody else is talking about immigration abiding by our laws. Everybody wants us to be a law-abiding country. It doesn't matter what color skin you are. And I think that if we can talk about the immigration problem with that tone, guess what? We're going to do very well in 2016.
First of all,
real quickly, because we got to move on to the second.
We tend to put together that we can do immigration and get the Hispanic vote. You want to get people's vote as a party? Pro-growth policies. What is good for this nation? There are two separate things. There is no guarantee of the Hispanic vote if you do immigration, and that's something we need to separate as we deal with the issues in this country.
We're going to have to move on. Gosh, I wish we had more time. We could do the whole show on immigration. We really could. J.R. Gillespie writes this. He says, run government like a household. Don't borrow money for anything that's not needed. What's being done to rein in spending? Well, what is being done? We'll talk about it next and see if anything's being done. Stay with us. Well, there's so many things to cover. One final question on immigration before we move on, Sammy. The critics say, even if you did immigration reform, it doesn't matter. All the immigrants are going to vote Democratic anyway. Is that true?
Absolutely not. 44% of Hispanics supported George W. Bush in 2004. I sat down with Karl Rove after that election. We had a conversation. Now, I'm a lamb's agenda guy. I believe the only answer for America is not the agenda of the donkey or the elephant, it's the agenda of the lamb. But with that context, I do believe there are very strong conservative values that resonate with the Hispanic American community. 27% supported Romney. 27%, in spite of the self-deportation rhetoric and everything else we heard. So I do believe it is an opportunity for Hispanics to come back and affirm the conservative ethos that stands embedded in the Hispanic American community.
Okay, we may get back to some more of that in a little bit. Both chambers of Congress have approved an increase to the nation's debt limit, and for the first time, Republicans allowed it to pass without putting up a fight to curb spending. Now, here's what House Speaker Boehner had to say about it.
This is a lost opportunity for America. We're on a spending trajectory that's unsustainable. The president knows it. Every Democrat and every Republican in this town knows it. And it has to be dealt with. And so it's a disappointing moment, I can tell you that.
You know, it was a disappointing moment because it was just raising the debt ceiling. David Webb, you're a Tea Party guy. How frustrated were you, and do you feel like that this was a real failure to not push for something in the debt ceiling deal?
I'm frustrated with the spending problem in Congress. I'm frustrated with Speaker Boehner. I'm frustrated with the Republicans on this issue. It's disheartening to see that the federal government as a whole, you're all to blame for this, Republicans and Democrats and otherwise, for this spending problem. With that said, I see a point of strategy in this. And the point of strategy, which is the bitter pill we have to swallow, we have no choice, is that the Republicans need to not buy more bullets, political bullets, for the Democrats going into 2014. We will have no chance of stopping Obama for 2 more years if we don't win take more seats in the House, if we don't win the Senate, and we're able to either override the president. There are Democrats who will vote with us on some issues. So I'm conflicted, I'm disappointed, but I understand the strategy point that could work. Now, for the Republicans, there is going to be massive failure on their part, Congresswoman. Take this back to Congress, takes the Speaker Boehner. If over the next several months you don't deliver to the American people, you're going home on break and you've got to talk to the people, and you deliver solutions, tangible results on issues, you also have the power of the purse. And it is incumbent upon you to use the power of the purse to block, to not fund. It's your constitutional responsibility to not fund programs, because if the American people and the independent voters, the likely voters, don't see results, you will not win the Senate.
Congresswoman, you weigh in on that.
Yeah, I totally agree with him. What people say to us when we're out and about, talk about the spending, what are you going to do about it? I thought we were spending too much when it was $7 trillion. Now it's 17 plus almost 18. Here are some of the things we're doing about it. Every year I offer amendments and bills to cut 1%, 2%, and 5% across the board. Save a penny out of a dollar and do it for the children. Do it for future generations. Everybody ought to do that. If we did this, we would save over $11 billion out of our discretionary spending. And it's time to do that. Get rid of duplicative programs. And as we go through the appropriations process this summer, now that we've returned the power of the purse to the House, we force the president to sign a budget. What you're going to see us go to the floor and do is disallow spending on programs that have outlived their usefulness. Defund navigators, defund the extra IRS agents, defund a lot of Obamacare, because that's how we do it. Absolutely, we will do it.
Well, here's my issue. I have to go back to this. It hasn't. It hasn't been effective enough. And I understand the plan of taking a haircut here off things in 1100. There's over $400 billion in duplicative programs, according to a GAO audit. These programs are not being dealt with in the House. And unfortunately, the Republicans have been as guilty and are as guilty of pandering to things that support what keeps them in power.
I'm going to push back on David a little bit. David, what I don't think the Tea Party understands is when you get elected, government is about compromise. And the first thing, when I think Speaker Boehner did a smart thing when he said we're going to pass a clean debt ceiling bill, because he put the monkey on the back of the spending Democrats who won't cut a dime, and the spending president. And the problem that we have time and time again as a party is, I think, when we dealt with the government shutdown last fall, what we saw is a lot of Tea Party folks wanted to get caught up in repealing Obamacare when it didn't have a chance to be repealed, instead of focusing on delaying the individual mandate, which is, there's a great argument for that now. So I think the only way that Republicans are going to be able to really cut this federal debt and spending is if we get control of the House and the Senate.
Crystal, I think you make a very important point that I want to conclude this segment with, and that is that politics is ultimately an issue of math.
Right.
It is a mathematical issue. If you don't have the votes,
right,
it doesn't matter what you want to do.
Exactly.
You can take all the stands you want to take.
Right.
You lose. And then you lose and you don't really win the bigger issues. And I do think it's very important that what you said is taken to heart by our viewers. Republicans can win the rhetorical debate,
thank you,
but they've got to win the mathematical debate, which means you have to get majorities in both houses.
Here's a basic.
Well, we got to move on.
Right.
All right, I want to hear from you at Huckabee Show on Twitter or the Huckabee Show on Facebook. Coming up, can Republicans win on the problems of Obamacare alone? Or do they need to come up with some alternatives and other issues? We'll talk about it next. What more is there to say about Obamacare? The Congressional Budget Office figures the Affordable Health Care Act is going to cost America 2.5 million jobs. Part of the law keeps changing and getting delayed at the president's whim. And, of course, then you have this.
If you like your health care plan, you'll be able to keep your health care plan, period.
Well, it turns out that over 6 million people and counting have lost their plan under Obamacare. Congresswoman Blackburn, you have worked in this area. You're from a state that tried something at the state level like this called TennCare.
That's right. And
You've experienced it.
We have experienced it firsthand, and I think that's why Tennesseans did not want to do the Medicaid expansion, and it's also why they have said, you need to do everything you can to delay it, to repeal it, and to replace it. And my across-state line purchase of health insurance bill is one of those options for replacement. And we have the American Health Care Reform Act, which is a comprehensive replacement for Obamacare. It includes portability and across-state line purchase and insurance accountabilities and the opportunity for small businesses and individuals to experience that health care insurance deductibility just like big businesses do. It addresses medical malpractice reform. And guess what? It puts the emphasis on the patient and their doctor. And we like that. Gives them control.
Actually, let the doctor make the medical decision.
That's right.
But before I throw the panel into this, I want to just make the point that Republicans are going to come out pretty good this year because people are so unhappy with Obamacare.
That's right.
But in the long term, Republicans can't win just because the Democrats fumble the ball. They've got to pick it up and carry it to the goal line. So you mentioned one thing. Are there other ways the Republicans can pick up this fumble, take it to the goal line, and win on the issue, not just of being against Obamacare, but on real reform?
Absolutely there is. And what we want to do is make certain that we are talking about not only health insurance but health care delivery and having that accessible in local communities, underserved communities. I was in some of my rural counties in Tennessee this week, and it is amazing. Because of the Obamacare rules, people are losing insurance. Insurance costs have gone up sometimes as much as 700%. Hospitals cannot get reimbursement. Well, all of that means access is cramped. You might have that insurance card, but it does not mean that you have access to the doctor and to the care that you need. And we're really seeing access to care compromised.
Sammy, let me ask you, many of the Hispanic community are either Catholic or they are evangelical. Are there pieces of Obamacare that are so offensive to them that this could be a turning point in that community's vote?
There's three components. First, the idea of any funding that terminates life in the womb. It's morally reprehensible and egregious to the community. Second, even the growth of government. There's this thing about American exceptionalism. There's no argument. There really is. It's this radical idea that one of my mentors once gave me, which is real simple. It's God over man and man over government. There's a limited amount of space. If government grows, man and God have to move out of the way. So I do believe in limited government. And in that context, this is what I preach to my congregation. Uncle Sam may be our uncle, but he will never be our Heavenly Father. So this uber dependency on government to solve all of our problems, including our health care issues, I do believe it should be more in the states. Pre-existing conditions, as an evangelical Christian, as a Christian, I do believe it's something that we are morally compelled to support. And I do want all Americans to have health care, but not on the backs of multiple generations and not increasing the size of government.
David?
One of the areas where the Republicans and the federal government need to go to is, we started by the president's approach, and we seem to be fighting against his approach, health care for all. If we have a problem using the Democrats' numbers that there are 40 million uninsured in this country, and by the way, the CBO since day one has said that down the road there'll still be 30 million uninsured. Why aren't we looking at policies that help the 40 million and at the same time looking at things we can do with portability, with advance in the number of doctors, nurse practitioners, health savings accounts to fix the problems with insurance and providers for the ones that have it already. So the Republicans need to look at the governorships. Look at the governors. We have 29 governors. Look at those states. Find localized solutions. You may need to have sunsetted private-public partnerships for people who need health care, who have pre-existing. But you're not going to do it by not focusing on the people with the problem, not on the rest of the country.
Well, I think in the reality is that health care is ultimately the responsibility of the individuals.
Exactly.
They've got to take some responsibility. You'll never be able to spend our way into healthy behavior, and that's a part of it, is making it so that the doctors and the patients are the ones who are in the transaction, not third-party people paying, third-party people making the decisions, because when you remove both the patient and the doctor, no wonder you end up with
responsibility,
such a mess.
personal
responsibility indeed. All right, well, coming up, diversity in the Republican Party. And this is one of the things we've heard from Mark Hodge. He writes on Facebook, a good friend of mine sees the entire party as racist. I'm considered the exception to her mindset. So why does Mark's friend see it that way? That's what we'll talk about next. Well, we're talking about how Republicans win and the issues they need to tackle in order to do it. Please welcome back our panel. David Webb, host of Sirius XM Patriot Radio, founder of Tea Party 365 and a Fox News contributor. Crystal Wright, editor of conservativeblackchick.com. Reverend Sammy Rodriguez, president of the National Hispanic Christian Leadership Conference. And Republican Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee. All right, we're going to talk about diversity in the Republican Party, because sometimes the criticism is Republicans are a middle-aged, old white guys club, and nobody else can really play, nobody else can win. Crystal, let me get right to the point with you. We had this situation recently where Tim Scott was called a ventriloquist dummy by the head of the South Carolina NAACP. I just found that outrageously offensive. Is it possible for people of color to find a place in the conservative movement and in the Republican Party?
Well, sure there is. I'm an example of that. I mean, there's no reason, it's no mystery why I decided to name my blog Conservative Black Chick, to bust through stereotypes that the Republican Party, the party of Lincoln, is inclusive. I mean, that's why the party was created, after all. I mean, a little history lesson here. Lincoln and the Republicans broke away from the Whigs because the Whigs wanted to expand states out west, and they wanted to allow them to become slave states, guys. So we were the party that elected the first blacks to Congress. I hope everybody knows that. But the Congresswoman and I were talking about this before we all got together, and what we said is, look at all of us on this panel with you. We're pretty representative of diversity.
Yeah, I'm the only old white guy here.
Right. So, right, but you're part of, you're the minority.
You didn't say it, Crystal, but I knew it was coming. I knew it was coming.
Well, look, no, I was coming, but you took the words out of my mouth. But the thing is, aren't we all representative of the melting pot that is America and conservatism? But the problem is, why isn't the leadership in our party, like the RNC, like, on the House, the Senate side, I don't care where you want to look at it, let's put forward the faces of the Congresswoman, me, David, and the good Reverend here. And the more we put forward the faces that our party looks like the Faces of America, the more people will feel welcome. But you can't feel welcome, pardon me, Governor Huckabee, if all we see day in and day out on national television is old white males. And I know that we're bigger than that.
Sammy, do you feel welcome in the conservative movement, the Republican Party?
Well, I resonate with the ethos of the conservative movement, especially on both vertical and horizontal issues. Not only on the economy and limited government, but even on social values that I still deem to be important, by the way. But it's just a matter of optics. The perception is it's angry white Republican males. Why is the Republican Party so angry, according to those in the Latino and African American community? Why are they angry? And they're opposed to everything. The Republican Party needs to revitalize itself by resurrecting the justice platform of Abraham Lincoln with Ronald Reagan's optimism. If we can reconcile Lincoln's platform of justice, and we can talk about justice without being big government justice, but if we can recapture justice, and if the Republican Party can, again, reinvigorate the communities with Ronald Reagan's optimism, you will see African American and Latinos saying yes.
Would that resonate?
We're going to call our party, and we're going to call our party the Great Opportunity Party, not the Grand Old Party.
Slogans are all great. Now here's part of the problem. Long-term engagement. It's one thing to sit here and say this is what we need to do. What we have not done, and this happens with a change in leadership, whether at the RNC or in the Congress, as people change, the tactics and strategies change. What we need is to get into these communities, talk to the folks, regardless of young, old, black, white, gay, straight, it doesn't matter. President Reagan, attributed to him, my 80% friend is not my 20% enemy. But we need to get in these communities, get into long-term engagements with them, not political cycles. And for many years, for decades, I've been a Republican since I was 18. Okay, I made a choice based on the party and the values, and I said I agree with 99% or whatever percent of this, so this is where I belong. But what we don't do is we don't get in and deal with people at that level where they understand the policies.
I can tell you that, you know, I got 49% of the African-American vote in my state. People say, well, Republicans never get that percentage. I say you do when you build relationships in the community.
Right on the money. And what we don't.
That's the key.
Wait a minute, because David's right and you're right. This is a watershed moment. Governor Huckabee, you showed up. You didn't say, oh, that's an inner city. I'm not going to go because I'm a white guy. No, you were governor of all in Arkansas. So you said, I'm going to show up. And when you take the message to David's point of opportunity, when you say, hey, guys, you like keeping more of what you earn? Do you like sending your kids to great schools? Guess what? I don't care if you're purple, lavender, or lime green. You go, yeah, I want that. The minute you put the Republican Party name on it and not the face of Governor Huckabee showing up in the neighborhood, we're toast.
And I think that the key point to remember is that politics follows policy rather than the other way around. It's a big mistake I think Republicans have made. They put their politics out there, not their policies that empower people. And if we do the policies right and we do empower those families, the politics follows, and that's how it works.
Politics is downstream from culture. If you win the culture, you win the
All right, coming up, are social issues important in the midterm election? Well, we'll tell you when you come back. That's what we'll do. We are back talking about how Republicans win, and we ask you to chime in on a host of topics, including social issues like birth control, same-sex marriage, and many of you share the sentiments of Bob DeMuth. He writes this. He says, these issues are so far down on the list of things that must be triaged in order to save our country. You know, Sammy, I don't know that I agree with Bob. I think these issues still resonate with some people. I'm not saying they're as important as jobs, but what's your take from your community as to whether or not these things matter anymore?
Truth must never be sacrificed on the altar of political or cultural expediency. This party must stand convicted to speak truth, but reconcile that truth with compassion. These values, these social values, these are the values that stem from our Judeo-Christian value system, the very system that stands as the central core of African-American leaders, churches, and Latino churches. So if the GOP says, we're not going to discuss social issues, what you call social issues, what we call spiritual issues, moral issues, you will alienate even more the very communities you're attempting to gain and engage.
David, you're shaking your head. You don't think so?
I think we're painting too black and white a picture of a reality in America.
You got to mention brown, too. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
White, brown. Yeah, throw them all in there. Throw them all in there. We're painting too simple a picture. First of all, conservatism is a movement. Republican is the party. social issues matter to some, but not all voters. More and more the youth, and I'm going down a train of thought that's happened since the 80s. It was cool to have a black friend, then it was cool to have a girl who was a friend, then it was cool to have a gay friend. Now nobody cares what your friend is. This is American culture. It doesn't make it bad or good. We have to have some sort of moratorium on giving our opponent the weapons to use against us. Doesn't mean that we give up our values.
David, hold on a second. Here's what the reality is. Of the 80 million people who self-identify as evangelical Christians in this country, 50% of them didn't even register to vote. And of those who did, only 50% of the registered voted. If 10% more of the evangelicals had voted for Romney, we would be talking about President Romney. When you give those people no reason to go and you take their motivation away,
Governor, the only reason is not the social issues. And by the way, it's their fault.
All right, let me throw one more at you, though, David.
Right.
Every social conservative in Congress votes fiscally conservative. Every one of them. Not every fiscal conservative votes socially conservative, but every fiscal conservative, by a thorough vote count, votes consistently a conservative across the board. Congresswoman, let me let you jump in on, does it matter? Are you still hearing from constituents for whom these issues matter at all?
Oh, I absolutely hear from people about these issues because they see it as the fabric of America. I say, you can look at 5 things: faith, family, freedom, hope, and opportunity. And you keep that underpinning strong, and you're going to keep your focus on freedom, free people, free markets. People understand that political freedom and economic freedom are linked, and you have to have that total picture. I think it's important for us to talk about it in the right way.
Yes.
I think it is important for us to have the right tone, to have the right messengers, and it is important to keep those issues very focused in the forefront. Of course, jobs in the economy are issue number 1.
Sure.
Obamacare is issue number 2. But making certain that we preserve our first principles, that always comes out when people talk about
as a woman, as the only other woman on the panel, I think the Congresswoman makes a great point. America will always be about family. But it's the way the Republican Party and conservatives are talking about social issues that bothers me as a woman. And we're alienating women that we need to bring back into the fold.
That's right.
And what happened? Romney lost the woman vote by 10 percentage points. And I'm convinced it was because, to David's point, the left does a great job of putting us in a box. War on women. You know this all too well, Governor Huckabee. So what we need to do is, why don't we have more women the face of the party talking about how women are the ones who usually are making sure the home fires are burning and keeping physical house in order as well. Why don't we have women talking about life is awesome, as I can be a mom, I can be a career woman, and I can protect life. But where we lose is when we talk about and vilify those who make other choices than preserving the life of a baby.
We're running out of time. Let me just say this. I don't think we want to vilify anybody.
That's what we're
I think that's not the point.
Yeah.
But neither should we ever apologize for believing something, and nor should we let the Democrats and the far left give us a lexicon and tell us what we can and can't say.
So let more women say,
I got no problem.
preserve the life of a baby.
Panel, thank you very much. I'm going to have to end it here because that's just the way time works.